So this is Dr. Kavita Singh, Associate Professor in Department of Civil Engineering in Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. So today we are going to discuss a topic called as watershed characteristics. So if you remember in the previous lectures, we have already discussed about the watershed management, what is a watershed, how the shed of the water from the different streams, it will come and collect to a common outlet. So this all the watershed characteristics, based on these characteristics only this all things will happen. So first of all, we should understand what are the characteristics of the watershed. Then only we can understand about the watershed management. So let us start with the contents today. So our contents will be like watershed characteristics, topography, size and shape, soil type, land use and land cover, hydrology, climate, geology, water bodies, human activities, biodiversity and ecosystem services. So these are all characteristics about the watershed. So we'll discuss one by one what are the characteristics. So let us discuss about the first topic, that is topography. So before that, let us understand about the watershed characteristics. What is a watershed characteristics? So watershed is like, first of all, you should know watershed is like shedding the water to a common outlet from all the places. All the streams will come and store the water in this common outlet. Okay, so common outlet will be there. From here, the water is distributed or the water is used for the any kind of purpose. Now, what is the characteristics here? When you talk about the characteristics, we always discuss about the size and the shape of the watershed, topography of the watershed, what are the soil features over there, soil category over there. How can we understand the soil categories, either biological, physical or hydrological? So watershed characteristics refers to the physical, biological and hydrological features that define a watershed and influence its behavior and functioning. It will influence the behavior and functioning of the watershed. So understanding these characteristics is essential for effective management. So when you do this, when you understand about these characteristics, it will be like size, shape and soil type and storage capacity. This all matters when you talk about the watershed characteristics. So let us understand one by one characteristics of the watershed. Topography. So what is a topography? Topography means the undulating features, ups and downs, wherever you see. There will be some hilly areas, some slopy areas, some plateau areas. All the areas which is up and down, it will be keep on the topography changes up and down. So that all depends on this watershed characteristics like slope and elevation. So what is the slope and elevation? So the slope and elevation of a watershed determines the speed and direction of water flow. It determines the speed and direction of the water flow. First of all, we have to understand about the slope and elevation. So what is the slope and elevation? So if the more steeper slope will be there, here suppose slope is there, if the steeper slope will be there, steeper slope, more what you say, because of the steeper slope, the flow of the water will be more, and if the elevation is more, the flow of water also will be more. So the slope and elevation of the watershed, which is determined by the speed and the direction of the water flow. So steeper slopes typically lead to the faster runoff, increased erosion, while flatter areas may promote the infiltration and slower the water movement. So runoff will be increased and flatter areas may promote the infiltration rates, and the slower the water movement will be occurred. Now watershed divide. So watershed divide, the high points and ridges that define the boundary of the watershed, like wherever the division of the watershed will be there. So at the high points and the ridges, they will define the boundaries of the watershed. Wherever you can see the watershed areas will be demarcated like this. So watershed area will be in such a way like you can see from all the places the water will come and it will collect to a common outlet. So these are the streams, we can say different streams from different ways. Based on the topography, it will come and collect to a common outlet. Okay, so this is the common outlet. Now water flows the downhill and it divides towards the watershed outlets For example, river, lake, or ocean. So it flows down the hill, and the watershed outlet will be there. So river, lake, and oceans it will be converted to either river, lake, and ocean. Now, size and the shape. So what are the size and the shape of this watershed characteristics? If you talk about size and the shape, so we have under this we have area, shape, and area shape. So what is the area of the watershed here? So size of the watershed affects the volume of water. It can collect the water, how much area. If the area is larger, suppose the area is larger, so can collect larger area can collect it can collect the more water in such regions, and larger watersheds tend to have more diverse landscapes and more complex water flow patterns. Now, if you talk about the shape, so the shape of watershed influences water flow and the concentration times. Now, here the elongated watersheds generally have more uniform flow, while circular watershed may concentrate flow more quickly towards the outlet. Permeability. Now, soil type. What is the soil type here? So, in the soil type, if you talk about the soil type, so you can see the permeability, how much is the soil is having the capacity to absorb the water. So, if it is a sandy soil, it is having more capacity to absorb the water. So, wherever you see the sandy soils, it is higher permeable and promote the infiltration rates, while clay soils have low permeability leading to more surface runoff. So clay soil is not having any permeability layers. It is not able to the water is not able to seep inside the ground. So permeable soils have the low permeability leading to the more surface runoff. So it can absorb more water if it is a sandy soil, but whereas when you talk about the clay soil, it is having very low permeability leading to the more surface runoff. Now talking about the erodibility, what is erodibility? So the susceptibility of the soil to erosion by water. Like which type of soil, depending on the soil erosion will take place. The susceptibility of the soil to the erosion by the water. So how the soil is at the present, which type of soil is there, based on that the erodibility activity will occur. So soil with high erodibility contribute more sediments. Wherever you see the high erodibility contributes the more sediments. So wherever the high erodibility soils will be there, it will contribute to the more sediments. It will just erode the sediments right from the top layer to the lower level, and the sediments are accumulated in such water bodies, affecting the water quality and the habitat. So it will help us to just get to know about the water body, what type of quality and what type of water qualities is having, and which will be affecting the habitat of the human animals. So soil is having, like with the high erodibility, contributes the more sediments to the water bodies, and the water quality also will be affected by the erosion. Why? Because all the sediments will be flowing and just accumulating in such a place, which will affect the water quality. Along with the erosion, it will carry all the sediments, it will carry all the pollutants to its destination, and it will make the water quality very low. So that all depends on this. Now, depth and composition. If you talk about the depth and composition, so deeper soils with higher organic matter content. So it is having a deeper soil with a higher organic content matter can store more water. So deeper soil with higher organic content, if it is having, it will store the water more. So if organic content is more, it can store more water, supporting the plant growth and reducing the runoff. Now, if you talk about the land use and land cover, what is a land use and land cover? Land use and land cover, we have already discussed many times. So land use means utilization of the land, how the land is utilized by the human being. So utilization of the land by different activities, like with agriculture, with buildings or construction works, and type of density of the vegetation, which influences the infiltration, evaporation, evapotranspiration, and the erosion. Now, forested watershed generally have a lower runoff and erosion compared to the agriculture urbanized area. Now, urbanization. So, what is urbanization? So, if you remember, we have discussed many times in the previous lectures also. Urbanization is the area which are converted into cities, villages to cities. So, conversion, the expansion of urban areas. expansion of urban areas is called as urbanization. So impervious surfaces such as roads, buildings, parking lots reduce infiltration and increase the surface runoff, leading to the higher flood risk and the water pollution. So which will be like impervious surfaces like roads, buildings, parking areas, lots, infiltration and increase the surface runoff, leading to the higher flood risk. Why? Because impervious surfaces is not having the capacity to just hold the water. The water cannot seep inside these impervious surfaces. So if the road is impervious surface, the water flow will be more, the runoff will be more, and the water will not hold in such places. So if urban areas, wherever you find buildings, if you find the parking lots, there the infiltration rate is and increase the surface runoff. Infiltration rate is very low, and it will increase the surface runoff. The water will not be holding in that areas. Surface runoff will be increased, leading to the higher flood risk and the water pollution. Now, agricultural practices. What are the agricultural practices? Farming activities including tillage, crop rotation, and use of fertilizers impact soil health, water quality, and the runoff patterns. So, farming activities including the tillage and crop rotation will use the fertilizers impact, and it will impact the soil health and the water quality and even the runoff. How the agricultural practices will be impacting here is like wherever the crop rotation activities are taking place, wherever you find that fertilizers are used in the fields, that will mix into the water whenever the waterfalls occur, whenever the rainfall occurs, it will mix into the water and water will be flowed away and it will be collected to a common outlet point, and it affects the soil health. First of all, how it will affect the soil health? Because the water will be the soil will be affected by the fertilizers, lot of heavy metals, lot of pollutants which are mixed in the soil will be run off along with the water, and it will just settle to a common outlet. So it will reduce the water quality, it will impact the soil health as well as the runoff patterns based on the agricultural practices. So if you wherever the agricultural practices where it is followed as the crop rotation activities there, it will use the fertilizers, they will use the fertilizers and they try to impact the impact on the soil health will be affected by these agricultural practices. Now if we talk about hydrology, what is hydrology? So hydrology is basically related to the water. Now stream network, the pattern and density of streams and rivers in a watershed, which affects how water moves through the landscape, which will affect how water is moving through a landscape, like streams, rivers in a watershed, which will affecting the water which is moving through a landscape, will tell us about the stream network. Stream networks means from how is the flow from here to here. So what is the direction from here to here or from here to here? What is the direction of the flow? It will tell us about, in this hydrology, this stream network, it will tell us about the pattern of the streams. So the pattern and density of the streams and the rivers in a watershed, which affects how water moves through the landscape. So how the water is moving through the landscape and how it is just affecting the landscape, that all will be explained by the stream networks. Like we have different patterns here. When you talk about in hydrology, we have patterns here, right? We have dendrite pattern, we have circular pattern, and we have terralis. So we have different patterns here based on the stream networking, based on the water which is present on the surface of the earth. And this will tell us about the different channels, how the river in the watershed which affects and how the water moves through the landscape. So that is the basic thing we can just get to know. Now dendritic pattern is one of the pattern which is tree-like structure. Networks are common and it will allow for the efficient water drainage. So dendrite-like networks, and it is a common and it allows us efficient water drainage. So tree-like structure means it will just show us this kind of pattern. So this kind of pattern will be dendritic pattern. So if it is this kind of pattern, we can just get to know about the networks of the common and allows us efficient water drainage. Water flow regimes. It includes the surface runoff. base flow and groundwater contribution to the streams, and interflow, water moving laterally and through the soil. So water flow legumes is the includes the runoff, surface runoff, and base flow of the base flow is about the water, groundwater contribution to the streams, how the groundwater is contributing to the stream, and interflow is the how the water is moving laterally through the soil. So this all information can be gathered through this water flow regimes. So whatever the water flow regimes is there will be followed by this channels of this water flow, and it will be understood. So the balance of these flows affects the water availability and the quality. So if you balance this flow, the groundwater flow and the lateral flow. So here you can see the groundwater flow and the lateral flow, if it is balanced, then the water availability and the flow affects the water availability and the quality. Now hydrological response. So the watershed reaction to precipitation events. Now what is precipitation here? What is precipitation? It is not only rainfall. Precipitation means rainfall, snowfall. Okay, snowfall. This all we can say hailstorms. So that all comes under the precipitation. Precipitation. So it is not only about the rainfall, it is about the precipitation, water in the form of either in the form of snow, either in the form of rain, either in the form of hailstorm, including the speed and volume of the runoff. Peak flows and the likelihood of the flooding can be explained through this hydrological response. Now, if you talk about the climate, what is the climate? So precipitation, the amount, intensity, and the distribution of rainfall or snowfall in watershed. So precipitation, as I told you, it is not only basically it is about the rainfall and the runoff relations, rainfall, snowfall or hailstorms, that all comes under the precipitation. So how does the climate affect the watershed characteristics? So watershed characteristics, how does it affect the amount of intensity and the distribution of rainfall or snowfall in the watershed? How intense it is, the intensity, precipitation intensity, how intense it is, how and the distribution of the rainfall or snowfall in the watershed, the precipitation, how it is affecting. Intensity means maybe the rainfall, if it is high or low. Okay, high or low. So if it is having the high intensity and with a large prolonged period, maybe half an hour to 1 hour, that means the runoff will be affected and the distribution of the rainfall or snowfall in the watershed will be affected. Climate determines the overall water input, which affects runoff infiltration and groundwater reaches. Now climate determines the overflow of water input. It will determine the overflow of the water input, which affects the runoff and infiltration rate, and the groundwater recharge will also be affected with the based on the precipitation. How we can say that how the runoff is affected? If the more runoff is there and the soil is not able to just hold the water, and if the precipitation is very high with a high intensity, that means the runoff will take place and the infiltration will not be there and the groundwater recharge will not be there. There will be a problem with the groundwater recharge. So based on the precipitation also, this watershed characteristics are affected. Now coming to the temperature, which influence the evaporation rates. It will influence the evaporation rates, snow melt and growing season for the vegetation. So temperature means either it is hot or cold. So wherever you see the temperature which is affecting the area, that is, if it is a summer season, if it is a hot summer, if lot of temperature is more, that means the evaporation rates are more high and the slow melt activities will be taking place and the growing season for the vegetation and all will be impacted with the balance and the ecosystem health. So this is directly affecting. Temperature is also one of the major cause or factor which will affect the watershed characteristics. If it is having high temperature, that means the evaporation rate is more, the slow melt is more. So evaporation rate is more. If evaporation is more, that means the rainfall will be frequently occurring. If the snow melt is there, that means immediately the water is just collected by huge amount of water will be flowed into the watershed area, and the growing season for the vegetation will also be affected, which will impact the water balance and ecosystem health. As well as if snow melt occurs, it will affect the ecosystem health because suddenly much of the water will be flowed and accumulated in a region wherever the water body is present. Now, seasonal variability. So, seasonal changes in precipitation and temperature can lead to seasonal changes in precipitation and temperature. They can lead to the wet and dry periods. Like season changes in precipitation, the temperature can lead to the wet and dry seasons. Like whenever you can see in the precipitation, that also is affected by the wet season and the dry periods, and which are affecting the availability and the stream flow and the soil moisture conditions may occur in this region. So seasonal variability affects the changes about the precipitation, temperature, wet and dry periods, and affecting the water availability of the stream flow, and the soil moisture is also affected by this seasonal variability. Now coming to the geology. So what is a geology? Basically, a geology, when you talk about geology, basically it is about the rocks and minerals. When you study about the rocks and minerals, that is about the geology of that area, the total rock structure of that area. So geology, underlying the geology influences the soil information, soil formation and water storage. So geology tells us about the what type of soil is formed. So based on the type of rock, soil formation information can be known. So if the rock structure is about the sedimentary rock, if the rock structure is about the igneous rock, so based on that the soil formation we can tell, and just we can come to a conclusion that this area will be affected by the watershed or not. Soil is the geology also plays a very important role in the wherever you see the type of the rock, that will tell us about the soil formation and the storage of the water. In most of the places, if you see the rock type is like a sedimentary rock, of the water storage capacity, if it is not having, it is like permeable layer is not there, that rock is very hard, that kind of things will not affect, I mean the storage of the water will be affected by this kind of things. For example, porous rocks like sandstone and the allow us for the greater groundwater reaches. So wherever you see the porous rock, it will allow the water to seep inside the ground, and it will help us to just tell us about the greater groundwater recharge facility will be available wherever you see the porous rock. So the greater groundwater recharge we can just get to know in such regions, while non-porous rocks like granite and will be limit infiltration. So granite is not having the infiltration rate. So if you see any sandstone in such regions in watershed region, if sandstone is present, that means it is having the capacity of just seeping infiltration rates are more. So that means that area is having the less water problems, so groundwater issues won't be there in such region. So that will be affected basically. So in areas where you have non-porous rock like granite, so that areas will be affected by the watershed. So these characteristics of geology is also the main important characteristics of the watershed. Now faults and fractures in the geology. So geological structures can create a pathways and the groundwater movement, or it can act as a barrier which is influencing the flow of water in the subsurface. So it will act as a barrier, it will influence the flow of the water in the subsurface. Geological structures can create the pathways for the groundwater movements, like based on the structures, based on the fault and structures, we can just, it will help us to tell us about the groundwater movement, whether the groundwater movement is high or low. Based on that we can see whether it is a barrier or influencing the flow of the water in the subsurface. Aquifers, the presence and characteristics of the aquifers. So the presence and characteristics of the aquifers within a watershed will determine the availability of groundwater. So the presence of characteristics of aquifers within a watershed, whatever presence of characteristics of the aquifer will be affecting the watershed, and it will determine the availability of the groundwater for the drinking water, for irrigation and base flow in the rivers. So aquifers, presence of aquifers, characteristics of the aquifers in a watershed will help us to tell us about the availability of the groundwater and availability of the drinking water facilities, and later irrigation facilities also will be helpful in this regions, and which is a base flow in the rivers. Now water bodies. So water bodies also plays a very important role here in the watershed characteristics. Like lakes and ponds. Lakes and ponds are the natural and artificial water bodies within a watershed, and it can store the water, it can regulate the flow and provide the habitat for the aquatic life. So if any place, if the lake and ponds are present, so that will be like in the natural or artificial water bodies, In a watershed, it can store the water. Wherever lake is present, it can store the water. It will regulate the flow. How means regulating the flow means cycle will be the water cycle will be regulated. Okay, like the water cycle, the hydrological cycle will be evaporation will be taking place, condensation will be taking place, precipitation activities will be taking place. So based on this water body present, this is also important role here. So wherever this water flow is present, it will provide the habitat for the aquatic life. So they also play a role of sediment and the nutrient cycle here. So wherever the pond and lake is present, they will play the nutrient cycle role here. Now, wetlands, areas where water saturation supports, where the water saturation supports the unique plant and the animal communities, will be also having helping in this watershed characteristics, and the wetlands as a natural filters, removing pollutants from the water and help to regulate the flow and reduce the flood risk assessment in such cases. So water flow is also helpful. Now, riparian zones like the interface between land and river or stream. So these areas are critical for maintaining the water quality. Riparian zones are helpful in the maintaining the water quality, providing the habitat and supporting the biodiversity in such regions. So in these regions, there is an interface between the land and the river or the streams, and these are the critical for the maintaining the water quality, which will provide the habitat and which will support the biodiversity activities. Now, human activities is also one of the main characteristics of this watershed characteristics. So human activities means infrastructure. So infrastructure also affects the characteristics of the watershed, like wherever you find the dams, reservoirs, or the levees and other infrastructure modify the natural water flow and affecting the flood risk and the sediment transport and the ecosystem. It will affect the sediments and the transport and the ecosystem. The dams, reservoirs, levees, and are the main problem for the flow of the water, or we can say that whether the water storage can be helpful or not, whether the water storage is available or not, water flow, how much is the chances of a flood risk. Sometimes if the dams breaks off, there is chances of the flash flood activities, and this all will be affected by this pollution sources. So we have different pollution sources which will be affected by this watershed characteristics are affected, like how we can say point source, example wastewater treatment plants, and non-point sources is agricultural runoff, so which will introduce the pollutants into the watershed, impacting the water quality and the aquatic life. So point source means directly from the source from where the pollution will start, directly from the industries, directly from the wastewater treatment plants. The wastewater is just released out, and the non-point sources is agricultural runoff from where the water is runoff and will introduce the pollutants into the watershed, which will impact the water quality and the aquatic life. And water use. So human demands for the water, including for the agriculture, including for the industry and the domestic use, influence the availability of the water for the natural ecosystem and the downstream uses. So water use means human demands like asking for the agriculture purpose, for the industry purpose, for the domestic use purpose, influence the availability, and it will help us in the water for the natural ecosystem and downstream uses. Biodiversity and ecosystem services. So this is also one of the main characteristics of the watershed. Flora and fauna, the diversity of the plant and animal species within a watershed contributes to its ecological health and resilience. Flora and fauna means plants and animals. These are also which will contribute its ecological health and resilience to the watershed characteristics. Now, biodiversity watershed are better able to provide ecosystem services and such as clean water, flood regulation, carbon sequestration. So that all will help us in the providing the ecosystem services if the flora and fauna is present. The water cycle will be keep on running, and the water cycle maintenance, the health of the ecosystem will be maintained, and the ecosystem will be resilient in such regions. Now, ecosystem services, benefits provided by the watershed, natural processes including the water purification, habitat provision, erosion control, and the climate regulations. So this was about the watershed characteristics. So these are few references you can just go through to find out the more content about the watershed characteristics. You can go through the Summer Engineering book, and these are the links which you can just go through to find out the more content about the watershed characteristics. So that's all for today. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.